The sun came up over Red Fork Valley the way it always did in late August, mean and in no hurry about it. Cole Barrett was already in the saddle by the time the light crawled over the ridge. He'd been out since 4, checking the north fence line where a section of wire had come loose in the wind 2 nights back. His shirt was stuck to his spine with sweat, and he hadn't had coffee yet, and there was a knot behind his right shoulder blade that had been there since the spring roundup and showed no signs of leaving. He was 41 years old. He looked 50 on a good day. The ranch sat on 1,200 acres of hard Wyoming grass, most of it leased, some of it owned outright by way of a deed his grandfather had signed in 1889 when the valley still had more Cheyenne than white men. The house was a low timber thing with a wraparound porch that sagged on the west side. The barn was bigger than the house. The bunkhouse was bigger than both put together because Cole ran 3,600 head of cattle, and that took men. More men than he could comfortably stand, most days. He reined up on the rise above the south road and squinted down through the heat shimmer. Someone was walking up the drive. That alone was strange. The drive was nearly 2 miles long from the county road to the main gate, and nobody walked it. Ranch hands came on horseback. Supply wagons came on wheels. The occasional lawman came in a dusty Ford that rattled like loose teeth. But nobody walked. Cole took the spyglass off his saddle horn and put it to his eye. A woman, small, alone, dressed the color of weak tea, skirt dragging in the dust. She was carrying something, a bundle, maybe a coat wrapped around whatever else she owned in the world. Her hair was the color of wet straw, and it was coming out of whatever pin had been holding it. She walked with a limp on the left side that she was working hard to hide. He lowered the glass. "Hell," he said to the horse. The horse didn't answer. Cole rode down to meet her because that was the only decent thing to do. And Cole Barrett was not always a decent man, but he tried, most mornings, to start out that way. He pulled up 20 feet short of her, and she stopped walking, and they looked at each other across the dust. She was younger than he'd guessed from the ridge. Maybe 28, maybe 30. It was hard to tell with a face that tired. There was a bruise the color of old plums along her jaw on the left side, half hidden by her collar, and her lower lip had been split recently enough that it hadn't fully closed yet. She did not flinch when he looked at her. That was the thing he noticed. Most women in her condition would have dropped their eyes. She didn't. She looked right back at him, steady, the way a cornered animal looks at a hunter. Not in fear exactly, but in calculation, measuring. "Morning?" Cole said. "Morning." Her voice was lower than he'd expected, a little rough, like she hadn't used it in a while. "You lost?" "No, sir." "Long walk from the county road." "Yes, sir." He waited. She didn't offer anything else. A fly landed on the horse's neck, and the horse shook it off, and the silence went on. "You're on private land," Cole said finally. "I know. I'm looking for Mr. Barrett." "You found him." Something moved behind her eyes. Relief, maybe. Or the opposite of relief. The last door in a long hallway of doors, and she'd been praying it wasn't locked. "I heard in town you were hiring." "You heard wrong." The man at the feed store said, "The man at the feed store talks more than he ought to." She nodded, once, and shifted the bundle under her arm. Cole saw her knuckles were white around it. "All right," she said. "Thank you for your time." She turned to go. She made it 4 steps before Cole said, "Where are you aiming to walk to, exactly?" She stopped, didn't turn around. "Next town?" "Next town's 40 miles. "Yes, sir." "You don't have a horse?" "No, sir." "You don't have water either, from the look of you." She didn't answer that. She was still facing away from him, and he watched her shoulders rise and fall once, slowly, the way a person breathes when they are trying very hard not to cry. Cole Barrett had one rule. He'd had it for 11 years, ever since the winter of '94 when he'd buried a wife and an unborn child in the same pine box because the doctor couldn't get over the pass in time. The rule was simple. Trust no one. Need nothing. He'd carved it into the top rail of the corral fence with his pocket knife the morning after the funeral, and he'd lived by it so completely that the men who worked for him thought of him less as an employer and more as a piece of weather, something you planned around. He opened his mouth to tell her good luck and Godspeed and get off his land. What came out instead was, "What's your name?" She turned, slowly. "Lena," she said. "Lena Voss." That your real name? A pause. Just long enough. It's the name I'm using. Cole almost laughed. He hadn't heard an honest answer in a while, and that one came closer than most. You ever worked a ranch, Miss Voss? My father had goats and chickens, some horses once. Goats aren't cattle. No, sir. Can you cook? Yes. Can you mend? Yes. Can you ride? Not well. Can you shoot? She hesitated. Yes, she said, but I'd rather not. Cole looked down at her from the saddle for a long time. The sun was climbing, and the shadow of the horse was getting shorter under them, and somewhere up on the ridge a hawk was making lazy circles in the updraft, hunting breakfast. I'm not hiring, he said. I understand. I got a cook. Her name's Marta. She's been with this outfit since before I owned it, and she does not share her kitchen. I understand. The men sleep in the bunkhouse. You can't sleep in the bunkhouse. I wouldn't. And I don't need trouble. I've had my share. I'm too old for more. I'm not trouble, Mr. Barrett. He almost smiled at that. Almost. Miss Voss, he said, everything about you is trouble. You know that and I know that, and there's no point pretending otherwise. She closed her eyes for just a second. When she opened them, they were wet, but nothing had fallen yet. She had practice at that, he could see. She'd had practice for a long time. Please, she said. That was the word. That was the word that broke his rule. It wasn't the bruise on her jaw, and it wasn't the limp, and it wasn't the split lip. It was the way she said please. The way a person says it when they have said it 100 times before, and it has never once worked, and they are saying it now because they have nothing else left to try. Cole swung down from the saddle. There's a smokehouse out back of the main house, he said. It hasn't been used in 6 years. It's got a roof, a door that locks from the inside, and a cot my grandfather died on, which I'll have hauled out. You can stay there. You'll work for Marta in the kitchen and the garden and wherever else she points. You'll get $3 a week and meals. You will not go into the bunkhouse. You will not ride out with the men. And you will not, under any circumstances, ask me a single question that begins with the word why. Are we clear? Yes, sir. I don't want to know where you came from. I don't want to know what you're running from. I don't want to know the name on your birth certificate. The day I find out I can't trust you is the day you walk back down that drive, and I will not feel bad about it. Understood? Understood. He swung back up into the saddle. Walk up to the house. Tell Marta I sent you. She's short and mean and Mexican, and she'll try to run you off. Don't let her. No, sir. And Miss Voss? Yes? If whatever you're running from follows you here, you tell me. You don't wait. You don't hope. You tell me the day you see it coming. She nodded. Something in her face had gone very still. I will. He rode away before he could change his mind. Marta Delgado was 4'11" and 63 years old, and she had been cooking for Barrett men since Cole's father was in short pants. She stood on the back porch with her fists on her hips and watched the young woman come up the path. And before Lena had even reached the bottom step, Marta said, in a voice like gravel in a tin can, "No." Mr. Barrett said, "I don't care what Mr. Barrett said. I said no." Lena stopped at the foot of the steps. She looked up at the old woman and didn't argue. "All right," she said. Marta narrowed her eyes. "All right what?" "All right, ma'am. If you say no, I'll go back and tell him." "You'll go back and tell him what?" "That you said no." Marta stared at her. "And then?" "And then he'll probably tell me to go away." "And then?" Lena shifted the bundle under her arm. "I don't know, ma'am. I haven't thought that far." Marta's jaw worked. She was chewing on something invisible, the way she did when she was thinking. "Come here," she said, "up the steps, where I can see you." Lena came up. Marta took her by the chin, gently for Marta, and turned her face left, and then right, and then let go. "Who did that to your mouth?" "Ma'am." "Don't ma'am me, girl." "Who?" "A man I used to know." "Used to?" "Trying to." Marta grunted. She looked down at Lena's hands, at the dust on her skirt, at the way one of her shoes had a hole worn clean through the side. "You can peel potatoes?" "Yes." "You can gut a chicken?" "Yes." "You can keep your mouth shut when men come in drunk on Saturday night and say ugly things?" "I've had practice." "I bet you have." Marta opened the screen door. It squealed like something dying. "Inside," she said, "and wipe your feet. I'm not your mother." Lena stepped inside, and for the first time in 411 days, she was under a roof that did not belong to Victor Hale. The smokehouse was smaller than a horse stall, and it smelled like old cedar and iron and rain. Cole's foreman, a long-limbed, soft-spoken man named Jed Carver, hauled the cot out and cleaned the stovepipe and patched the high window with a scrap of oilcloth, all without asking a single question, which was one of the many reasons Cole had kept him on for 9 years. "You want me to put a lock on the outside of the door?" Jed asked, standing in the yard as the sun went down. "On the outside? In case she—" "Jed." "Yes, boss." "Put a lock on the inside of the door. A good one. Iron, and bring her the key." Jed looked at him a long moment. "All right, boss." "And Jed." "Yes, boss." "Tell the boys that woman is off limits, not in a mean way, in a remember your mother way. First man who says something sideways to her is walking to Cheyenne with his pay." Jed nodded slowly. He was 48 and had 4 daughters of his own. "I'll tell them." "Tell them good." "I will, boss." Cole watched him walk off toward the bunkhouse and then stood a long time in the yard, listening to the crickets start up, wondering what in the name of hell he had just done. The first 3 days, Lena barely spoke. She was up before Marta, which impressed Marta, who had been up before everyone on the ranch since 1879. She scrubbed the kitchen floor on her hands and knees without being asked. She weeded the herb bed. She mended a tear in the screen door. She moved around the edges of the house like a cat testing new territory. Quiet, watchful, always with an eye on the doors. Cole saw her once, on the second morning, carrying a basket of laundry out to the line. She was humming something under her breath. When she saw him watching from the porch, the humming stopped, and she dropped her eyes and kept walking. He didn't call out to her. He didn't say good morning. He went back inside and poured himself a cup of coffee and stood at the kitchen window and watched her pin the sheets to the line. And when Marta came in and saw him standing there, she said, in Spanish, something that translated roughly to old fool. "Speak English, Marta." "No," Marta said. "You don't deserve it today." On the 4th day, one of the hands came up lame. His name was Bobby Quinn. He was 19, freckled, from someplace in Missouri nobody had ever heard of, and he had caught his left hand between a post and a 3-year-old steer that had decided it did not want to be branded. 2 fingers were crushed. The middle one was bleeding badly. They brought him up to the house on horseback, Jed behind him holding him in the saddle. "Doc's 40 miles out," Jed said to Cole. "Nearest. And he's drunk half the time anyway. Get him inside." They laid Bobby on the kitchen table because it was the biggest flat surface in the house, and Marta started barking orders in 2 languages, and Bobby was white as a sheet and breathing in little gasps that weren't doing him any good. Lena walked in from the garden with a basket of tomatoes on her hip. She stopped in the doorway. She looked at Bobby's hand. She set the basket down. "Hot water," she said. "Clean cloths. Whiskey, if you have it. A needle. The finest one you own." Everyone looked at her. "Miss?" Jed started. "I don't think—" "Hot water," she said again. Quiet, but there was iron in it now. "Clean cloths, whiskey, a needle, now." Marta moved first. Marta moved like a woman who had just recognized something in another woman's voice, and what she had recognized was competence. In 90 seconds, Lena had Bobby's hand on a folded towel, the worst of the blood sponged away, her fingers working with a calm and a precision that stopped every man in the room from breathing. The middle finger was a ruin. The nail was gone. The tip was crushed. A shard of bone was visible through the torn skin. "Bobby," Lena said, leaning down so her face was close to his. "Hey, look at me. Look at my eyes." The boy looked. "You're going to lose this fingertip," she said. "It's already gone. I'm just going to clean up what's left so the rest of the finger has a chance. Do you understand?" "Yeah," Bobby whispered. "I won't lie to you. It's going to hurt worse than the steer did. But it'll be over in about 2 minutes, and then you'll feel better, all right?" "Yeah." "Say it like you mean it." "All right, ma'am." "Good boy." She looked up at Jed. "Hold his shoulders. Hard. Don't let him pull away no matter what he does." Jed put his big hands on the boy. Lena poured whiskey over Bobby's hand and over her own, and Bobby yelled. And then she started working, and Cole Barrett stood in his own kitchen and watched a woman who he had hired to peel potatoes calmly save a 19-year-old boy's hand with nothing but a sewing needle and a bottle of cheap rye. When it was done, when Bobby was bandaged and pale and asleep on a cot in the back room because Lena had fed him enough whiskey to stun a mule, she stood at the kitchen sink and washed her hands. She washed them for a long time. Her hands were shaking. Cole noticed that. He was standing in the doorway, and her back was to him, but he could see her shoulders, and her shoulders were shaking too, just a little, just enough to know. "Miss Voss," he said. "Yes." "Where'd you learn to do that?" A pause. "My mother was a midwife." "Your mother was a midwife?" "Yes, sir." "Midwives don't generally stitch crushed hands back together." Another pause, longer. "She did what needed doing," Lena said. "That's what she taught me." Cole leaned on the doorframe. "Miss Voss." "Sir?" "That's the second lie you've told me in 4 days. I'm keeping count." She didn't turn around, but he saw her shoulders go still. "Yes, sir," she said. "I know you are." He walked out of the kitchen and didn't press her on it. But that night, lying in his bed with the window open to the coyotes on the ridge, Cole Barrett thought about those hands. How steady they'd been on the boy. How they'd shaken only afterward. And he thought, wherever she's from, it wasn't a farm with goats. Wherever she learned that, she learned it somewhere people got hurt a lot. And then, because he could not help himself, he thought, who hurt you, Lena Voss? And how soon are they coming? The first week passed, then the second. She settled into the rhythm of the place the way water settles into a glass. The men stopped noticing her in the way men notice a new woman, and started noticing her in the way men notice a good foreman. Someone whose presence meant things would be where they were supposed to be. Bobby's finger healed cleaner than anyone had any right to expect. Marta, against every instinct in her small, fierce body, began to like her. Cole kept his distance. That was the rule. That was the arrangement. But he watched her. He watched her stand on the back porch one evening and look out at the mountains for so long that Marta came out and put a shawl around her shoulders without a word and went back inside. He watched her flinch the first time Jed raised his voice in the yard. A flinch so small you'd miss it if you weren't looking. The whole body kind. The kind a person develops over years. He watched her fall asleep once at the kitchen table with a darning needle still in her hand, and he watched Marta cover her with a coat and not wake her. And he watched the gray light of dawn come up through the window and find her still there. And he thought about the cot in the smokehouse and the lock on the inside of the door, and wondered if she ever actually slept in it, or if she sat up against the door instead, listening. On the 14th night, he found out. He'd come in late from checking the north pasture and was walking past the smokehouse when he heard her scream. Not a loud scream. A choked off, swallowed one. The kind people make in nightmares, or the kind people make when they've been taught not to make any. He stopped in the dark. He heard her breathing, fast and ragged, through the wood. He heard her whisper, almost to herself, "No, no, please, no!" And then a long silence. And then very quietly, her voice again. "You're not here. You're not here. You're not here." Over and over like a prayer or a chant. Something a person says to make it true by saying it. Cole stood in the dark for a long time. He did not knock on the door. He did not call out to her. He went back to the main house and sat at his kitchen table and poured himself a glass of whiskey that he did not drink, and he thought about a man whose name he did not yet know, and he thought about what he would do to that man when he met him, and he understood, with the clean, cold clarity of a man who has finally admitted something to himself, that he was going to meet him. It was only a matter of time. The next morning he was in the yard when the rider came down the drive. A stranger. Gray duster, black hat, a star on his chest, some kind of star. Cole couldn't read it yet at that distance. Cole walked out to meet him at the gate. The man reined up, tipped his hat back. He was maybe 50, with a gray mustache and flat blue eyes. His horse was a good one, and it had been ridden hard. "Mr. Barrett?" "That's me. My name's Calder. I'm a United States Deputy Marshal out of Cheyenne. I'd like a word if you have a moment." "What about?" "A woman." Cole felt the ground shift under him. He did not show it. He had buried a wife and a child and run a ranch alone for 11 years. He did not show it. "What woman?" Calder reached into his coat and brought out a folded paper. He did not hand it over. Name's Elena Marchetti, though she might be going by something else. Voss, possibly. We've heard Voss. Brown hair, gray eyes, 5'4", scar on her left forearm. Would have come through this country in the last 2-3 weeks on foot. She's wanted in connection with the theft of a significant amount of money, jewelry, bearer bonds, cash, from the residence of a Mr. Victor Hale of Silver Creek. Victor Hale. You know him? I know the name. Owns most of a county out that way. Cattle, mining, a bank or two. That's the one. And you're saying this Marchetti woman stole from him? I'm saying that's the charge, yes, sir. Mr. Hale has offered a substantial reward for her return. Return, he said, not capture. That's a Hale word, not mine. Cole kept his face still. I haven't seen a woman like that. No? No, sir. Mind if I ask around your place? Talk to your men? I do mind, actually. Calder raised an eyebrow. Cole leaned on the top rail of the gate. He looked at the marshal. He thought about Bobby Quinn's hand. He thought about the chant through the smokehouse door. He thought about the way she'd said please. Mr. Calder, he said, I run 3,600 head of cattle and 14 men on this place. My men work 12-hour days in the heat, and they don't need a federal marshal wandering around asking questions and stirring up nonsense over a woman who isn't here. If you've got paper, actual paper, signed by an actual judge, telling me to let you search my land, then show it to me and I'll cooperate. If you don't, then I'll ask you to turn that horse around and ride back the way you came. With respect. Calder studied him a long moment. You're a plain-spoken man, Mr. Barrett. I am. Mr. Hale is not going to be satisfied with a plain-spoken answer. Mr. Hale doesn't live in this county. No. And you, I notice, aren't from this county either. No. So I'd suggest, Cole said, that you both bear that in mind. Calder looked at him for another long moment. Then he nodded once and turned his horse. You'll be seeing more of me, Mr. Barrett. I figured. And probably of Mr. Hale. I figured that too. Calder touched his hat and rode off down the drive. Cole stood at the gate until the dust had settled. Then he turned and walked back toward the house. And he saw Lena standing on the back porch, framed in the kitchen doorway, her hand on the door frame and her face the color of ash. She'd heard every word. He crossed the yard to her. He came up the steps. He stopped 2 feet away from her. Elena Marchetti? He said quietly. She closed her eyes. Yes. And you stole from him. Her eyes stayed closed. Her jaw trembled once and steadied. I stole my grandmother's wedding ring out of his safe, she said, and enough cash to get me to the train station in Laramie. That's what I stole. He kept the ring in his safe because he said it was his now. Everything of mine was his, including me. Cole was quiet. He's my husband, she whispered. On paper. In the county records. He paid my father for me when I was 19. My father owed him money. My father drank. It was a legal transaction in everything but name. How old are you now? 27? 8 years? 8 years. And the bruises? 8 years of those too. Cole looked past her, into the kitchen, where Marta was standing very still at the stove, pretending not to listen. The lawman, Lena said. He'll be back. Yes, with Victor. Probably. I should go, Cole. It was the first time she had used his given name. No, he said. I can't stay here and bring that down on you, on the men, on Marta. I can't. Lena. Yes. I told that marshal no. I heard. I told him no because I meant no. You understand me? I didn't tell him maybe next week. I didn't tell him come back with more men. I told him no. That means I'm in this now. Whether you leave or whether you stay, I'm in it. You leaving just means you face Victor Hale alone on an open road, which I will not allow. You can't. I can, he said, and I will. She looked up at him. Her eyes were wet again, but the wetness wasn't falling. Why? I told you not to ask me questions that start with why. That was before. Yes, he said. It was. He didn't answer her question. He didn't have an answer he was ready to say out loud. Instead, he stepped around her and went into the kitchen and said to Marta, Tell Jed I need him. And the boys, all of them, up at the main house. Now. Marta wiped her hands on her apron. Ahora, she said, and she was already moving. Oh, that afternoon, 14 men stood in a rough half-circle in the yard behind the main house. Cole stood on the porch steps. Lena stood at the kitchen window behind him, watching through the glass. Marta stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. Boys, Cole said. They looked at him. Bobby Quinn was there, his hand still bandaged. Jed stood to the side with his hat in his hand. A wiry old cowhand named Sam Whitefeather, who'd worked the valley for 30 years and didn't speak unless he had something to say, stood at the back with his thumbs in his belt. There's a man named Victor Hale, Cole said. He's rich and he's mean, and he's coming here. He'll have men with him. He'll have paper that says he has a right to take the woman who's been working in the kitchen. That paper is not worth the ink it's written in. He doesn't have a right to her. Nobody has a right to her. She's under my protection and under the protection of this ranch. He paused. Any man here who doesn't want part of this can ride out tomorrow with a full week's pay and my thanks and no hard feelings. This is my fight. It doesn't have to be yours. The yard was quiet. Bobby Quinn, the boy with the bandaged hand, was the first to speak. He was 19 and freckled, and his voice cracked a little, but he said it anyway. Sir, he said, she stitched my hand. Jed nodded once, slowly. Sam Whitefeather shifted his weight and spat a stream of tobacco into the dust. I ain't going nowhere, boss. One by one, the rest of them either nodded or said nothing, and nothing was the same as yes. Cole looked at them a long time. All right, he said. His voice had gone a little rough. All right, boys. He cleared his throat. Then let's get to work. I want the approach watched. 2 men on the ridge, day and night, rotating. I want rifles oiled and ready. I want the cattle moved off the south pasture so there's no loose stock between here and the road. And I want every man on this place to know this. If you see a group of riders coming down that drive that isn't invited, you don't wait for me. You ring the bell. You ring it hard. He looked at them. Questions? Sam Whitefeather spat again. One, boss. Sam, this Hale. How bad a man exactly? Cole thought about the chant through the smokehouse door. You're not here, you're not here, you're not here. Bad enough, he said, that a woman walked 40 miles in bad shoes to get away from him. Sam nodded slowly. Then he ain't leaving this valley, boss, not on his own 2 feet. Nobody laughed, nobody smiled. It wasn't that kind of thing. That night, Cole was on the porch when Lena came out. She stood beside him for a long time without saying anything. The stars were thick overhead. Somewhere out on the ridge, a coyote sang, and another one answered, and then they both went quiet the way coyotes do when something they don't recognize crosses their wind. Cole, she said. Yeah. I don't know how to thank you. Don't. I have to. I have. No, he said. You don't. Because I didn't do it for thanks, and I won't know what to do with them when you try. She was quiet. Can I ask you something? Depends. Why'd you break your rule? He didn't answer right away. He looked out at the dark pastures, at the thin line of the ridge against the stars, at the single yellow square of light that was the bunkhouse window where the men were still awake, talking low. I had a wife, he said finally. A long time ago. She died in labor. The baby too. The doctor was snowed in on the other side of the pass, and by the time he got here it was over. She asked me, the last thing she said to me, she asked me not to go hard. That was her word. Hard. She said, don't go hard, Cole, promise me. He swallowed. I went hard anyway. For 11 years. Lena was very still beside him. And then you walked up my drive, he said. And you said please. And I heard her. I heard her voice in yours, and I don't know, Lena. I don't have a better answer than that. I heard her, and I thought, maybe this is the thing. Maybe this is what I promised. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she reached out in the dark, and she put her hand over his where it rested on the porch rail. She didn't hold it. She just put her hand on top of it. Light, like a leaf landing. I'm scared, Cole, she said. I know. He's going to come. I know. He won't come alone. I know. And when he comes, I don't know if I can stand there and look at him. I don't know if my legs will hold. Cole turned his hand over slowly, under hers. He did not grip her fingers. He just let his palm be there, open, warm, under hers. "Then you stand behind me," he said, "until they do." She made a small sound, something between a laugh and the thing that is not a laugh. "And if they never do? Then you stand behind me forever," he said. "I can carry it. I've carried worse." The coyote on the ridge started up again. After a moment, the second one answered. They stood that way on the porch for a long time. A woman who had stopped running 40 miles ago, and a man who had stopped running 11 years ago, and somewhere out beyond the dark horizon, past the ridges and the rivers and the telegraph poles that ran all the way back to Silver Creek, a man named Victor Hale was being handed a letter from a deputy marshal named Calder. The letter said he had found her. The letter said where. Victor Hale read it twice. Then he folded it, very carefully, and put it in the inside pocket of his coat. And he went to the cabinet where he kept his pistols, and he began, without any expression on his face at all, to clean them, one by one, in the yellow lamplight of a room 300 miles away. The letter had been delivered by a boy on a lathered horse, and Victor Hale paid the boy a silver dollar and watched him ride out of the yard before he even broke the seal. He read it standing up by the tall window in his study, with the last of the afternoon light coming in through the lace his dead mother had hung there 40 years ago. Barrett Ranch, Red Fork Valley, 320 miles. He read it twice, the way a careful man reads any piece of paper that is going to cost other people their lives. Then he folded it along its original creases and slid it into the inside pocket of his coat, and he walked across the study to the mahogany cabinet where he kept his pistols. There were 6 of them. He owned more rifles than he could count, and a shotgun for every season, but the pistols were the ones he cared about. He took them out one by one and laid them on the green felt of his desk, and he sat down in the chair his grandfather had brought from Philadelphia in 1862, and he began to clean them. He was 53 years old. He was not a large man. He was not a loud man. He had the thin, careful hands of a banker, which is in fact what his father had been, and the flat, patient eyes of a man who had learned early in life that other people were, at bottom, a kind of livestock, a resource to be counted, fed when necessary, and disposed of when no longer useful. He had been married once before Lena, a woman named Caroline from a good family in Denver. She had fallen down a flight of stairs in the 2nd year of the marriage and broken her neck, and the coroner Gessler, a man who banked with Victor, had ruled it an accident. There had been no children. There were, as far as the county records were concerned, no complications. When he had bought Lana from her father 8 years ago, he had been careful to have the paperwork done correctly. A marriage license signed by a justice of the peace who also banked with Victor. A transfer of her father's outstanding debts, marked paid in full. A quiet understanding with the sheriff of Silver Creek that certain household matters were not matters for the sheriff. All of it legal. All of it clean. She had been 19 and thin and had not looked at him once during the ceremony. He had liked that. He had not wanted a woman who looked at him. He had wanted a woman who did what he said. And for almost 8 years she had. Now she was in a place called Red Fork Valley, in the kitchen of a cattleman he had never heard of, and the deputy marshal Calder, who was on his payroll the same as the coroner and the justice of the peace and the sheriff, had told him that the cattleman had said no. Victor polished the barrel of the first pistol with a square of soft chamois. He polished it for a long time until he could see his own flat eyes in the blue of the metal. Then he rang the little silver bell on his desk, and a man came in. "Send for Rourke," Victor said quietly, "and for Tillman, and for the Doyle brothers. Tonight. All 4 of them. In this room. By 10. "Yes, Mr. Hale." "And tell the stable to ready 12 horses for 3 days out. Grain, bedrolls, the good ones." "Yes, Mr. Hale." The man left. Victor picked up the second pistol. He did not hurry. He had never hurried in his life. 320 miles away, Cole Barrett was also not hurrying. He stood in the middle of the main barn at the first gray of morning, looking up at the hayloft with his hands on his hips, and he was thinking, very methodically, about angles of fire. The barn was the largest structure on the place. 2 stories of rough-cut pine, built by his grandfather and reinforced by his father and patched over and over by Cole himself. It sat 50 yards north of the main house. If a man with bad intentions came down the drive, the barn was on his left. The bunkhouse was further back on the right. The main house sat dead center, its porch facing south toward the road. The smokehouse, where Lena slept or tried to, was tucked behind the main house, half hidden by a stand of cottonwoods. Cole had spent most of the previous night walking the ground with a lantern, and what he had concluded was that the ranch had been built by men who had not expected to be attacked. The sight lines were wrong. The cover was wrong. The water pump was out in the open, which meant that if a siege went long, a man would have to cross 20 yards of naked yard to fill a bucket, and he would do it under fire. It was not a fortress. It was a working cattle ranch. There was a difference. Jed Carver walked in through the barn door with 2 cups of coffee and handed one to Cole without a word. They drank in silence for a moment. "How long, you figure?" Jed said finally. 4 days? 5 if he's slow." "He ain't slow." "No. He'll have men." "Yes." "How many?" "I don't know, Jed. I don't know what Victor Hale is. I know what she said he is. I know what the marshal said he is. I figure 10. Could be more." Jed nodded slowly. "We've got 14, counting you and me. We've got 14 counting me and you, and 3 of them are under 21, and Sam Whitefeather is 62. Sam Whitefeather could outshoot any 2 of your under 21s in his sleep. That's fair." They drank their coffee. "Boss," Jed said. "Yeah. I gotta ask you something, and I want an honest answer." "All right. This woman, is she worth 14 men's lives?" Cole stared up into the rafters. He did not answer for a long time. "Jed," he said, "I don't know how to answer that. I don't think any one person is worth 14 lives, but I'll tell you this. The question isn't, is she worth it? The question is, what are we if we let a man like that ride onto our land and take a woman out of our kitchen with our mouths shut? Because if we let that happen, Jed, then we're not men. We're just cattle a little further up the chain. And cattle don't get to decide when they get moved." Jed was quiet. "That's a hell of a speech, boss." "I didn't mean it to be." "Well, it was. Anyway." Cole finished his coffee and set the cup on a crossbeam. "Put Sam and Bobby on the ridge first," he said. "Rotate them at noon. Whoever's on watch keeps the Winchester and the spyglass. I don't want guessing. I want a count of riders before they hit the 2nd mile." "All right." "And Jed." "Yeah, the young ones. The Missouri boy. The 2 brothers from Cheyenne. If it gets bad, if it gets truly bad, I want them in the root cellar, not out in the yard. You understand?" "I understand, boss." "I didn't raise them and they ain't mine, but I'll be damned if I watch 19-year-olds bleed out over my mistakes." Jed looked at him. "Your mistakes, boss?" "My choices. Whichever word you want." Jed drank the last of his coffee. "All right, boss," he said. "All right." Inside the main house, Marta had the kitchen smelling like flour and lard and the slow green smell of pole beans snapping against tin. She was making enough bread for an army because, as she had said that morning in Spanish, an army was coming, and an army did not fight well on an empty stomach. Lena stood at the butcher block, her sleeves rolled to the elbow, kneading dough with the quick practice punches of a woman who had been doing it since she was a child. Her hair was pulled back in a kerchief. The bruise on her jaw had faded to yellow. She had not slept more than 2 hours the night before, and it showed around her eyes, but her hands were steady. "Mija," Marta said, without looking up from the beans. "Yes, ma'am?" "You stop a minute." "I'm almost done with this batch." "Stop." Lena stopped. She wiped her hands on her apron. Marta set down the bowl of beans. She came around the table and stood in front of Lena and looked up at her sick, way up, because Lena was almost a foot taller, and she put one small brown hand flat against Lena's cheek. "Escúchame. Listen to me. When he comes, when this man comes, you do not hide. You hear me?" "Marta, you do not hide, mija, because hiding is what he wants. Hiding is what he taught you. That is his chain, still on your leg. You take it off." Lena's eyes filled. She did not let them fall. "I don't know if I can." "You can." "How do you know?" Marta's hand moved from her cheek to her shoulder. "Because I was 19 once," she said. "And I had a man once. And I ran once. And I hid for a long, long time. And then one day I stopped hiding. And he is dead now. And I am here. And I make bread on Tuesdays and beans on Fridays. And I am 63 years old, mija, and nobody has ever laid a hand on me again. You understand?" Lena nodded. She couldn't speak. "You are not alone," Marta said. That is the thing he never wanted you to know. When you stop running, you find out you were never alone. You were just told you were. She patted Lena's shoulder and went back to her beans. Lena stood there for a long second with the dough under her hands and something moving in her chest that she had not let move in 8 years. Then she punched the dough down, hard, and kept working. That afternoon, Cole found her on the back steps, sitting with a tin cup of coffee, watching two men ride up the ridge with rifles across their saddles. He sat down beside her, not close, not far. "Marta all right?" he said. "Marta is better than all right. Marta is a force of nature." "That she is." They watched the riders. "Cole," Lena said. "Yeah. I want to tell you some things." "You don't have to." "I want to." He nodded once. "I was 19, she began quietly. "My father owned a little place outside Silver Creek, goats, like I told you. That part was true. But we had lost most of the herd the year before. A sickness went through, and we couldn't pay the mortgage, and we couldn't pay the feed store, and my father had been drinking since my mother died when I was 12. Victor Hale came around, offered to help. He helped for a little while. And then one night he came to supper, and he said to my father, in front of me, he said it while I was pouring coffee. He said, "I'll settle everything you owe, Marchetti, every penny. I'll give you $100 on top, cash. All you have to do is give me the girl." She paused. My father said yes before I had put the coffee pot down. He said yes while I was still standing at the table. Cole did not look at her. He was looking at the ridge. "I thought," Lena said, "that it was going to be a job. Housekeeping, something. I was 19 and I was stupid. I rode to his house the next week. My father drove me in the wagon. There was a justice of the peace waiting on the porch when we got there. The ceremony was 7 minutes long. My father didn't stay for supper. He took his $100 and he went home, and 2 months later he drank himself to death in a creek bed. They found him face down in 4 inches of water." Cole's jaw tightened. He said nothing. "The first time he hit me," Lena said, "was 3 weeks after the wedding. I had burned the eggs. He said, 'You will not burn the eggs again,' and he hit me across the mouth with the back of his hand. That night he came to the bedroom, and he was very gentle. He said, 'I don't want to have to do that. I don't want to be the kind of man who has to do that. You have to help me not be that man, Elena,' as if it were my job to protect him from himself. And I was 19 and I believed him, Cole. I believed him for almost 2 years. 2 years, Cole said, low. And then I stopped believing him, but it didn't matter because by then I didn't have anywhere to go. My father was dead. My mother was dead. I had no brothers or sisters. The sheriff in Silver Creek was his. The doctor was his. The woman at the church who would have helped me was his cousin. The whole town was his. Every time I thought about running, I would picture myself on a road with no money and no horse and no name, and I would think, where? Where does a woman like me go? Who would take me in that he could not reach? And then? And then last summer he broke my arm." Cole closed his eyes. "I was bringing him a plate. I tripped on the edge of the rug. The plate went down. He stood up from his chair and he took my arm just above the wrist and he turned it until it snapped. And then he sat back down and he said, 'Clean that up, Elena.' And he went back to his newspaper." Cole was very still. The doctor came that night. Victor told him I had fallen off a horse. The doctor said, "Of course, Mr. Hale," and he set my arm and he left. And I was lying in that bed with the laudanum the doctor gave me starting to work. And I thought, I have to go or I have to die. Those are the only two. And I was too young to die, Cole. Even after all of it, I was too young. So I started that night in my head to plan. "A year," Cole said. "A year and 2 months. I waited. I was a good wife. I never burned the eggs again. I learned the combination to his safe by watching him in the mirror on the wall when he thought I was asleep. I sewed the inside of my coat into a pocket so I could carry paper money. I memorized the train schedule out of the Silver Creek Depot. And one night in July, when he was away on a cattle buy in Cheyenne, I took my grandmother's wedding ring out of his safe, and I took $84 cash, and I walked out of that house, and I never looked back. The bruise on your jaw, the lip. That was 2 nights before I left. He came home late. He had been drinking with the sheriff. I said something. I don't even remember what. Something so small I can't even... She stopped. I said the butter was hard. I said, "The butter is hard tonight, Victor. I'm sorry." And he reached across the table and he hit me, and I thought, that's the last time. That is the very last time. That is the sound I am never going to hear again. Cole did not trust himself to speak for a long moment. Lena. Yes. I want to tell you something, and I want you to hear it. All right. He's not going to lay a hand on you again. Cole, I'm not saying that to comfort you. I'm not saying it as a thing to say. I'm telling you a fact. He is not going to lay a hand on you again. If he tries, I will put him in the ground. And if I can't, Jed will. And if Jed can't, Sam Whitefeather will. And if Sam can't, Marta will poison his coffee. Do you understand what I am telling you? She laughed. It surprised her. It came out wet and broken, but it was a laugh. Marta would too. Marta would do it twice just to make sure. She wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist. I don't know what to do with kindness anymore, Cole. I don't know where to put it. It scares me worse than the other. I know. Why does it scare me worse? Because you can survive the other, he said. You've had practice. Kindness is the thing you don't have practice for. She looked at him. The light was low, and his face in profile was the hard, honest face of a man who had weathered a great deal and had nothing left to prove about any of it. You keep surprising me, she said quietly. I'm trying not to. Don't stop. He almost smiled. He didn't quite. But something around his eyes softened, and she saw it, and she filed it away somewhere deep in herself where she had been, for a long time, keeping nothing. On the third morning, the first of Cole's neighbors rode up the drive. His name was Silas McCready. He ran the place to the west, 40 sections of scrub country, and he was a sour, narrow man who had once sued Cole's father over a water right and lost, and who had not spoken to the Barrett family in a cordial way since 1898. He reined up at the gate, and he did not dismount. Barrett! McCready, hear you got trouble coming. Word gets around. Jed's boy told my foreman yesterday afternoon. Couldn't keep his mouth shut at the feed store. Figures, McCready spat. He chewed his mustache for a moment. I don't like you, Barrett. I'm aware. I didn't like your daddy, and I don't like you, and I think your fences are 1.5 feet over my line on the northwest section, and I'm going to prove it one of these days. All right. Well, but, McCready said, I got a daughter. She's 14. And the idea of some rich son of a bitch from Silver Creek thinking he can ride through this valley with an armed party and collect a woman out of a kitchen like she was a horse out of a stable, that idea doesn't set right with me. It doesn't set right with my wife either. My wife says to tell you she's sending over 2 hams and a sack of flour before sundown, and she expects the sack back clean. Cole didn't know what to say for a second. Tell her I'll see it washed. You do that, McCready shifted in the saddle. I got 4 hands. 3 of them can shoot. My foreman is old, but he was at Wounded Knee, for whatever that's worth, and he hasn't forgotten. If it comes to it, we'll ride over. Just ring that bell loud enough. Silas, don't. I was just going to say, don't say it, Barrett. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because I have a daughter, and because a man like that, if he gets away with it at your place, comes to my place next year. That's how it works. That's how it always works. All right? Don't come to my funeral when I die. I won't. Good. McCready wheeled his horse and rode off. Jed, who had been standing in the barn door listening, walked up to Cole and shook his head slowly. Well, I'll be damned. Yeah. Silas McCready, boss. I know, Jed. That might be a sign of the end times. Don't start. But Cole was almost smiling, and Jed saw it, and Jed did not comment on it because Jed Carver had known Cole Barrett for 9 years and had seen him smile maybe 6 times, and he was not going to ruin a 7th by remarking on it. 2 more neighbors came the next day. Then a third. Then a man Cole barely knew from the little Lutheran church down near the crossroads, who arrived at sunset with a wagon load of dry ammunition and said only, "My wife says to tell you we're praying," and then rode off before Cole could answer. Cole stood in the yard with 12 boxes of 44-40 cartridges at his feet, and he did not know what to say about any of it. The valley knew. The valley had decided. That was a thing he had not expected. Lena stood on the porch watching the wagon go, and she said very quietly, "Cole, yeah, I have spent 8 years being told the world is a place where no one helps. I know. He told me that almost every day.
No one will help you, Elena. No one. You are mine because no one else will have you. I know. He was wrong. He was wrong about a lot of things. But that one especially. Yeah. She wiped her eyes on her sleeve. I'm going to help Marta with supper, she said, and she went inside and Cole stood a long time looking at the boxes of cartridges in the dirt. On the fourth day in the late afternoon, Sam Whitefeather rode down from the ridge at a pace that told Cole everything before Sam said a word. Riders, boss. 9 of them. Maybe 10. How far? 2 miles out, coming steady. Hail? Man out front in a gray coat on a black horse. 50-ish, thin, fancy saddle. That's him? There's a wagon in the back, covered. A wagon? Yes, boss. Cole's stomach moved a little at that. A wagon meant supplies, which meant a siege, which meant they'd come prepared to sit. Or it meant something else. He didn't let himself think about what else. Ring the bell, he said. Sam nodded and kicked his horse. The bell was an old mission bell Cole's grandfather had bought in Santa Fe in 1873. It hung on a crossbeam between the barn and the main house, and when Sam hit it with the iron bar, it rang out across the valley in 3 long strokes and 2 short, the pattern every hand on the place knew, the pattern that meant now, now, now. Men came running from the bunkhouse. Jed came from the corral. Bobby Quinn came from the smokehouse where he had been splitting kindling one-handed. Marta came out of the kitchen, already tying a shawl over her shoulders, and she had a shotgun in her hand, a short double-barrel Cole had never seen her hold before. Where'd you get that? He said. My husband, Marta said. 1889? He is dead. The gun is not. Marta, don't. All right. He turned to the others. Places. Everyone. Jed, take the barn loft. Sam, the smokehouse roof. Bobby, root cellar. I'm not telling you twice, son. Sir, I can... Root cellar. The boy's face went red, but he went. Cole turned. Lena was standing in the kitchen doorway. Her hands were twisted in her apron. Her face was the color of fresh snow. Lena. He's here. He's 2 miles out. We've got 10 minutes, maybe. I want you in the house, up the stairs, in the back bedroom. You understand? Cole. Lena. I'm not going upstairs. You are going upstairs. No, Cole. She let go of the apron. Her hands were shaking. He could see them shaking. But she walked down the steps and across the porch and stopped in front of him in the yard, and she looked up into his face. I'm not going to stand on the porch, she said. I'm not going to stand in the yard, but I'm not going upstairs either. I am going to stand behind you, where you told me to stand, in the doorway, where he can see me and I can see him, because Marta said something to me yesterday and I have thought about it all night, and she is right. Hiding is the last chain. And I am tired, Cole. I am so tired. I am going to take it off. He looked at her for a long moment. There were 100 things he wanted to say. Don't, please, you don't have to. Let me do this for you. Let me be the wall. All of them were true, and none of them were the right thing. All right, he said. All right? All right, Lena Marchetti. Stand in the doorway, but you stand behind the frame, and when I tell you to move, you move. Is that a deal? That's a deal. Good. Go. She went. Marta met her at the door and without a word pressed the shotgun into her hands. Mija. Marta, I can't. You can hold it. That is all I ask. You hold it. You do not have to shoot it. You just hold it. A man like him, Mija, when he sees a woman he has owned holding a gun, something happens in his head. You will see. Just hold it and breathe. Lena took the shotgun. It was heavier than she remembered guns being. She broke it open the way her father had shown her a lifetime ago. 2 brass shells winked up at her from the breech. She closed it. She breathed. They came down the drive in a loose column of 2, the way men ride when they are confident they are not going to be challenged. Victor Hale rode him the front on his black horse, his gray coat spotless despite 3 days on the trail, his hat brim low. Behind him on his right rode Calder, the deputy marshal, with a face that said he would rather be anywhere else. Behind Calder rode a big man with a scar across his nose, Rourke, though Cole did not yet know the name. Behind Rourke, the others, in pairs. At the back, the covered wagon, driven by a man Cole could not see clearly.
They reined up 20 yards short of the gate. Victor looked at Cole. Cole looked at Victor. "Mr. Barrett," Victor said. His voice was soft, almost pleasant. "I believe you and I have not had the pleasure." "No. My name is Victor Hale." "I know who you are." "Then you know why I've come." "I know what you think you've come for. You're not leaving with it." Victor's face did not move. He had a way of not moving his face that Cole had seen once or twice before in life, and it had never ended well for somebody. "Mr. Barrett, I have a federal deputy here with legal paper. I have a duly registered marriage license on file in the county of Silver Creek. I have a warrant, signed by a judge, for the return of stolen property from my household. I would prefer, very much prefer, that this be a matter of paper and not a matter of powder. I have come 300 miles, and I am tired, and I would like my wife back, and I would like to be home by Sunday. What is your price, Mr. Barrett?" "I don't have one." "Every man has one. I'm sure that's been your experience." Victor almost smiled. Almost. $5,000, Mr. Barrett, in gold. Today. For the inconvenience of having housed her these 3 weeks. No. 10. No. 20. Mr. Hale. Yes. You can say numbers all day. It won't change my answer. She is not yours. She was never yours. The paper you have is not worth a damn in this yard. The paper is worth a damn everywhere in the United States, Mr. Barrett. That's what paper is." "Not here," Victor sighed. A small, tired sigh, as if he were a patient man being asked to explain something to a child. "Marshal Calder." "Yes, Mr. Hale." "Would you read the warrant aloud, please?" Calder unfolded a paper. He cleared his throat. He began to read, and while he read, Lena stepped out of the doorway of the main house, and she walked, slowly, across the porch, and she stopped at the top of the steps. Calder stopped reading. Victor turned in his saddle. Every man in the yard, Cole's men, Victor's men, the marshal, Marta on the porch, Bobby Quinn peeking up from the cellar door, every one of them went still. Lena stood at the top of the porch steps in a dress the color of tea, the shotgun held loosely across her body, her hair coming out of its pins. She was trembling. Cole could see her trembling from 15 feet away. But she was standing. "Victor," she said. Her voice did not shake. That was the thing. Her hands shook and her knees shook, and her whole small body was shaking, but her voice was clean and clear, and it carried across the yard like a bell. Victor looked at her. "Elena, don't call me that. It's your name. It's the name you put on paper. It isn't my name. My name is Lena." "Come down off that porch, Elena." "No." "Come down off that porch and come home. You're home. Where you belong." "I am home, Victor. I just didn't know what home was until I got here." Something moved in Victor's face. Just a twitch at the corner of his mouth. Cole saw it. Cole had been watching for it. "You are being very foolish," Victor said softly. "I've been foolish for 8 years, Lena said. "This isn't the foolish part. The foolish part was believing you. The foolish part was thinking my father sold me to a husband instead of to a man who breaks arms over hard butter. The foolish part was thinking that a woman with a bruise on her jaw is a woman who deserved it. I am done being foolish, Victor. I am not coming home with you. I am not coming anywhere with you. And if you set one foot on this porch, I will put both of these barrels into your chest, and I will sleep better tonight than I have in 8 years. Do you understand me?" Victor's jaw tightened. The Marshal Calder looked down at his saddle horn. He had gone very pale. He had been a lawman for 22 years, and for most of the last 8 of them, he had taken money from Victor Hale, and he was looking at his saddle horn because he could not look at the woman on the porch. "Marshal," Victor said without turning his head. "Arrest her." Calder did not move. "Marshal Calder, I said arrest her." Calder swallowed. "Mr. Hale, sir, the warrant is for theft of a ring and some cash, and the lady here is my wife, Calder." "Yes, sir, and my wife has just threatened me with a firearm in the presence of a federal officer. Arrest her." Calder looked at the warrant in his hand. He looked at Lena on the porch. He looked at Cole standing in the yard. And he looked, Cole noticed, at Jed up in the hayloft of the barn with a Winchester laid across the sill, and at Sam Whitefeather on the roof of the smokehouse with another one, and at Marta in the kitchen doorway. and at 6 other men whose rifles he could not quite see but could certainly feel. Calder had been a lawman for a long time, and he had been a crooked lawman for a shorter time than that, and he was not, at bottom, a stupid man. "Mr. Hale," he said slowly, "I think I'd like to hear the lady out first, if it's all the same." Victor's head snapped around. "What did you say?" "I said I'd like to hear the lady out." "You work for me, Calder." "I wear a federal star, Mr. Hale. I don't work for anybody. I have from time to time let certain private arrangements influence certain official decisions. And I am prepared to say now, in this yard, in front of these witnesses, that those arrangements are going to end today." "Calder." "No, sir." "Calder, so help me." "No, sir." Victor sat very still on his black horse. His flat eyes moved across the yard, to the barn loft, to the smokehouse roof, to the men behind him, to Cole, to Lena on the porch. Counting. Cole had seen him doing it the whole time, and then, without warning, without a raised voice, without even a change of expression, Victor Hale drew the pistol from under his coat, and he shot Deputy Marshal Calder out of the saddle. The sound of it was enormous in the yard. Calder pitched sideways off his horse. He hit the dirt and did not move. His horse bolted. 2 of Victor's men had to spin their own mounts to keep from being trampled, and for one long second, nothing happened. Nothing at all. The yard held its breath. Then every rifle on the Barrett ranch spoke at once. Jed from the loft. Sam from the smokehouse. 2 men from the side of the bunkhouse Cole had not even told Lena were there. Cole himself from the yard, drawing from his hip. 1 shot, quick, at the man named Rourke, who was bringing his own rifle up. Rourke went backwards out of the saddle and did not get up. 3 of Victor's men were down before the first echo came back off the ridge. Victor wheeled his horse. He did not fire again. He rode, low over the neck, hard, back up the drive, his men ragged behind him, the covered wagon swinging wide as its driver lashed the team into a panicked turn. Cole ran for the porch. Lena was on her knees. The shotgun was on the boards beside her. She had not fired it. Her hands were over her face. "Lena? Lena, are you hit?" "No. No, No." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. I'm sure." "Cole, the marshal?" He looked. Calder lay in the dirt 20 yards out. His chest was a ruin. There was nothing to be done. "Lena, look at me. Look at me." She did. "You stood," he said. "You stood." Her face broke. She didn't cry exactly. It was something other than crying. It was a sound that started in her chest and came out through her mouth like something that had been locked in a room for 8 years and had finally kicked through the door. And Cole pulled her against him and held her there, on the porch, in the smell of gunpowder, and he did not say anything else for a long time. Behind them, up the drive, Victor Hale disappeared over the rise with what was left of his men. 3 of his riders lay in the yard. 1 of them was still breathing. Sam Whitefeather was already walking toward him with a length of rope, because Sam was not a man who left a breathing enemy breathing for long without at least tying his hands. It was over, for the moment, for that afternoon. But Cole looked up the drive, and he looked at the dust. Victor's horse had kicked up going over the rise, and he knew, with a certainty that was as cold as a well in November, that Victor Hale was not riding 300 miles home. Victor Hale was riding to the next hill, and he was going to turn around and he was going to come back. And when he came back, he was not going to talk. Cole put his lips against the top of Lena's head. "It isn't over," he said, very quietly, so that only she could hear. "I know," she whispered back. "He'll come back tonight, or tomorrow night. I know. We have to be ready. I know, Cole, I know. She pressed her face into his chest and she held on. And out in the yard, Jed Carver was climbing down from the loft with his rifle over his shoulder and his face the color of old ash. And Marta was kneeling next to the dead marshal with her lips moving in a prayer in a language none of the men would have recognized. And Sam Whitefeather was tying a stranger's hands behind his back with the unhurried skill of a man who had done it many times before. The sun was going down over the ridge. The light had gone that long, low, honey color it gets in that valley in late August, just before the dark comes in fast. And somewhere out beyond the rise, a man in a gray coat was reining up his black horse and turning in the saddle and looking back at the Barrett ranch with the flat, patient eyes of a man who had just remembered that he still had, in the back of that covered wagon, 2 20-gallon cans of kerosene and a box of long wooden matches that he had packed 3 days ago in Silver Creek against precisely this sort of disappointment. The first thing Victor did when he crested the ridge was count. 6 men. He had started the morning with 10 counting himself. The 3 bodies in Barrett's yard were Rourke, Davies, and the young Doyle, Micah, the one who could not stop talking. He had brought 2 Doyles, and now he had 1. The other 4 had scattered when the rifles opened up. 2 of them had kept riding, straight north, which meant they were done. Which meant Victor had himself, his remaining foreman Tillman, the other Doyle brother whose name he could not recall, and the wagon driver, a man named Petey who was 60 if he was a day and had not fired a shot in the yard because he had been too busy trying to keep the mules from bolting. 4 men. Against 14 or more, if you counted the neighbors the deputy had muttered about on the ride in before Victor shot him in the chest. Victor dismounted. He stood for a moment looking back down the long slope toward the Barrett place. From this distance he could see the barn, the house, the thin line of the drive. Smoke was coming from the kitchen chimney. They were cooking supper, probably. As if nothing had happened. As if they had not just killed 3 of his men and turned a federal officer against him in his own yard. Tillman came up beside him. Tillman was 42, bald, wide across the shoulders. He had worked for Victor for 6 years and had never once asked a question that began with why. Boss? Yes. We going back tonight? Yes. All 4 of us? Yes. Against how many, you figure? Victor was quiet for a moment. He was watching the smoke from the chimney. He was thinking about the woman on the porch, the way she had held the shotgun, the way her voice had not shaken even though the rest of her was trembling like a horse before thunder. I don't care how many, he said finally. Tillman nodded slowly. All right, boss. Go check the wagon. Make sure the kerosene didn't spill when Petey made that turn. And make sure Petey and the Doyle boy understand what we're doing tonight. If either of them wants to ride north and keep riding, I'll pay them through the week and forget their names. Yes, sir. Tillman walked back to the wagon. Victor stood alone on the ridge looking down at the ranch, and he let himself think, for just a moment, about what Elena had said. I am home, Victor. I just didn't know what home was until I got here. He had given her a house, he had given her a name, he had given her food and clothing and a roof, and everything a woman could reasonably want, and she had stood on a stranger's porch and called it home with a shotgun in her hands. That was betrayal. That was the deepest kind. And betrayal, in Victor's experience, had only one answer. He walked back to his horse. He swung up. He rode to the wagon where Tillman was checking the ropes on the kerosene cans. Tonight, Victor said, 2 hours past full dark. We come in from the north side, not the drive. Petey and Doyle take the wagon around to the barn. You and I go for the house. We pour the kerosene, we light it, and we wait at the gate. When they run out, well, and they will run out, we take her. Anyone who stands between us and her gets put down. Understood? Understood, boss. No talking, no hesitation. We are not negotiating anymore. We are not offering money. We are ending this. Yes, sir. Victor looked at the wagon, at the kerosene cans, at the box of matches wrapped in oilcloth. Tillman. Boss. If she dies in the fire, she dies. Do you understand what I'm saying? Tillman was very still. I understand, boss. I'd prefer to take her back alive. But if she chooses to burn, that is her choice. Either way, I'm going home Sunday, and Cole Barrett is going into the ground. Yes, sir. Victor turned his horse. He did not look back at the ranch again. He rode to a stand of cottonwoods a quarter-mile off and told the men to make camp without a fire. And he sat on a flat rock with his back to a tree and cleaned his pistol again, slowly, the way a man cleans a pistol when he is trying very hard not to think about the fact that his wife, his property, his legal and lawful wife, had just told him in front of witnesses that she would rather die than come home. He cleaned the pistol for a long time. Then he loaded it, and he put it back in the holster under his coat, and he closed his eyes, and he waited for the dark. Back at the ranch, they dragged the bodies off to the side of the yard and covered them with canvas. Jed wanted to bury them right away, but Cole said no. He said the ground could wait until tomorrow, and what mattered tonight was the living, not the dead. So they left the 3 men under the canvas, and Jed said a few words over them anyway because Jed had a mother who would have expected it, and then they went to work. Cole sent 2 men up to the ridge with the best rifles and told them to watch the north approach, not just the drive. He sent another 2 to the south pasture to bring in the horses and pen them close to the house where they could be saddled fast if it came to running. He pulled every loose bucket, barrel, and trough in the yard over to the pump and started filling them with water, because if Victor came back, it would be with fire, and fire was the one thing Cole did not have an answer for. Lena helped. She did not ask if she could. She just picked up a bucket and started hauling water from the pump to the porch. And when Marta told her to stop, to go inside to rest, Lena said, "No, ma'am," and kept hauling. By the time the sun went down, they had 37 buckets of water distributed around the yard, on the porch, beside the barn, next to the bunkhouse. It would not be enough if the whole place went up, but it was better than nothing, and nothing was what they'd had an hour ago. Cole found Lena sitting on the back steps in the last of the light, her sleeves rolled up, her hands red and raw from the pump handle. He sat down beside her without asking. "You all right?" "No." "Honest answer. You asked for one." He almost smiled. "Lena." "Yeah." "What you did today? On the porch. That took something I don't have a name for." "It took stupidity." "No." "Cole, I stood there shaking so hard I couldn't see straight, and I told a man who has broken my bones that I would shoot him, and I don't even know if I could have pulled the trigger if he'd tried to come up those steps. That's not brave, that's not strong, that's just, I don't know what that is. That's what brave looks like, Lena. It doesn't look like not shaking. It looks like shaking and doing it anyway." She turned to look at him. Her eyes were red. She had cried earlier, hard in Marta's arms in the kitchen, and the crying had left her face swollen and her voice hoarse. "He's coming back tonight, isn't he?" "Yeah." "With fire?" "Probably." "And if the house burns, we run. If the house burns, we fight from the barn or the bunkhouse until we can't, and then we run. But I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it doesn't come to that." "Cole?" "Yeah. I don't want you to die for me." He looked at her for a long moment. "Lena, I'm not dying for you. If I die tonight, I'm dying because a man rode onto my land and shot a federal officer in my yard and thinks he can take a woman out of my house by force. That's not about you. That's about what kind of man I am. And if I let that happen, then I'm not a man worth the name. So don't carry it. Don't think for 1 second that this is your fault. It's his. It has always been his." She closed her eyes. A tear ran down the side of her nose. She did not wipe it away. "I'm so tired, Cole." "I know. I don't mean tonight. I mean all of it. All 8 years. I am so tired of being afraid." "Then stop." She opened her eyes. "What? Stop being afraid." "Cole, that's not how it works." "Isn't it?" "No, you can't just decide not to be afraid. You can decide not to let it make your decisions for you. That's what you did today. You were afraid and you stood on that porch anyway. That's the thing he couldn't teach you, Lena. That's the thing he spent 8 years trying to beat out of you, and he couldn't. You can be afraid and still say no. You did it once. You can do it again." She stared at him. "You really believe that?" "I do." "Why?" "Because I watched you do it 4 hours ago, and I'm watching you do it right now, sitting here with raw hands talking to me instead of hiding in the smokehouse. You've already done it, Lena. You just don't trust it yet." She laughed. It was a wet, broken sound, but it was a laugh. "You are the stubbornest man I have ever met. I've been told. And the kindest. That I have not been told." She reached out and took his hand. Just took it, held it. Her palm was rough and damp and warm. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not letting me run." He squeezed her hand once, gently, and let go. "Come on," he said. "Marta's got supper inside, and you need to eat something, and I need to talk to the boys about watch rotation before full dark." They stood. They went inside. Behind them, the sun dropped below the ridge, and the valley filled with that brief blue hour that comes between day and night in high country, when the air goes soft and the shadows go long and everything is very still. And 1.5 miles to the north, 4 men saddled their horses in silence and checked their guns and waited for the last of the light to die. That's it. They ate in shifts, half the men at the table, half on watch. Cole sat with Jed and Sam Whitefeather and three others whose names were Miller, Hicks, and Calhoun. Marta had made a stew that was more beans than meat, but it was hot, and it was filling, and nobody complained. Lena served it. She moved around the table with the ladle and the big iron pot, and every man there said, "Thank you, ma'am," and meant it. When she got to Cole, he looked up at her and said quietly, "You should eat too." "I will." "When?" "When you're done." "Lena." "Cole, I'm fine. Let me do this." He let her. When the first shift was done, they swapped out. Bobby Quinn came in from the ridge with his bandaged hand and his rifle over his shoulder, and he sat down at the table and Lena put a bowl in front of him, and Bobby looked up at her and said, "Miss Lena, I just want you to know, whatever happens tonight, I'm real glad you're here." "Bobby, I mean it, ma'am. You stitched my hand when I thought I was going to lose it, and you stood on that porch today, and I just think you should know you've got friends here, real ones." Lena's throat closed up. She put a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you, Bobby." "Yes, ma'am." She went back to the stove. Marta was standing there with her arms crossed, watching, and when Lena came close, Marta said in Spanish, something that translated roughly to, "You see, mija, you see what happens when you stop hiding." Lena nodded. She could not speak. Marta patted her arm and went back to slicing bread. Full dark came at 8:30. Cole posted men at every corner, 2 on the ridge with orders to fire a warning shot at anything that moved, 2 in the barn loft, 2 at the bunkhouse. Sam Whitefeather on the smokehouse roof because Sam could see in the dark better than any man Cole had ever known, and Jed on the porch with a repeating rifle and a Colt on his hip. Cole himself stayed in the yard, moving between posts, checking sight lines, making sure every man had ammunition and water and knew where to fall back if the fire got too close. At 9 o'clock, Lena came out onto the porch. "Cole," he turned, "you should be inside." "I was inside. Now I'm not." He walked up to the porch. She was holding something in her hands. A coat. His coat. The heavy wool one he wore in winter. "It's going to get cold tonight," she said. "You should have this." "Lena, it's August. It's August in Wyoming. It'll be 40 degrees by midnight." He took the coat. He did not put it on. "Thank you." "Cole." "Yeah. If it goes bad tonight, if he gets past you, I want you to know something." "Don't." "Let me say it." He was quiet. "These 3 weeks," she said, "have been the first 3 weeks in 8 years that I have felt like a person. A whole person. Not a piece of property, not something broken that needs to be managed. A person. And that is because of you. And because of Marta. And because of these men. And I need you to know, whatever happens, I will not forget that. I will not forget what it feels like to be treated like I matter." Cole looked at her for a long time. "You do matter, Lena." "I know. I'm starting to believe it." "Good." She stepped forward quickly, and she kissed him on the cheek, just once. Just a light, brief press of her lips against the side of his face, and then she stepped back. "Don't die, Cole Barrett." "I'll do my best." She went inside. Cole stood on the porch with the coat in his hands and his face burning where she had kissed it, and Jed Carver, sitting on the rail 10 feet away, said nothing, but his mouth twitched at the corner, and Cole saw it. "Don't start, Jed." "Didn't say a word, boss." "You were thinking one." "Thinking ain't a crime yet." Cole pulled the coat on. It was, in fact, getting cold. At 9:40, one of the men on the ridge fired a warning shot. The sound of it cracked across the valley like a stick breaking, and every man in the yard froze. Cole ran for the ridge. He made it halfway up the slope before the rider came down. A boy named Calhoun, young, out of breath. "4 riders, boss, coming in from the north pasture. No torches yet, but they've got something on a wagon." "How far?" "Quarter mile. Maybe less." "Go. Ring the bell. 3 long, 1 short. That's the north signal. Move." Calhoun ran. Cole turned and sprinted back down to the yard. By the time he reached the porch, the bell was ringing and men were pouring out of the bunkhouse, pulling suspenders over their shoulders, rifles in hand. "Jed!" "Here, boss." "Barn. North side. Take Miller and Hicks. If you see a torch, you shoot the man holding it before he lights it. Understood?" "Understood." "Sam." "Here, boss." Smokehouse roof. You see the wagon you put around through the driver. I don't care if he's your cousin. He's driving kerosene and he doesn't get close. Got it, boss. Cole turned to the porch. Lena was standing in the doorway, Marta beside her. Marta had the shotgun again. Lena had a revolver Cole had given her an hour ago. She was holding it the way a person holds a snake. Necessary, but unwelcome. Lena, Marta, inside, upstairs, back room. Bolt the door. Do not come out until I tell you it's clear. Cole, Lena, I can't fight him and worry about you at the same time. Please, for me. Go upstairs. She looked at him. She nodded once. All right. Thank you. She and Marta went inside. Cole heard their footsteps on the stairs. He heard a door close. He heard the bolt slide. He turned back to the yard. Positions, he shouted. Nobody fires until I do or until they light a torch. We do not waste ammunition on shadows. Clear? A ragged chorus of yeses came back. Cole checked the loads in his Colt. 6 rounds. He had a belt with 18 more on his hip. He hoped that would be enough. He did not let himself think about what it meant if it was not. The yard went quiet. The stars were thick overhead. No moon yet. The dark was the kind of dark you only get in open country, where the sky is so big it makes you feel like an ant. Cole stood in the center of the yard and listened. At first, nothing, just the wind in the cottonwoods, just the creak of the barn door swinging slightly on its hinge. Then, hoofbeats. Slow, deliberate. And then from the north side of the barn, a voice. Barrett, Victor's voice, calm, almost friendly. I know you can hear me, Barrett. Cole did not answer. I'm going to make you one more offer. One more, and then I am done offering. You send Elena out to me, right now, alone, unarmed, and I will ride out of this valley, and you will never see me again. I will forget your name. I will forget your face. I will forget everything that happened in this yard today. All I want is my wife. That is all I have ever wanted. Send her out, Barrett, and this is over. Cole stayed silent. Barrett, I know you are a reasonable man. I know you do not want your ranch to burn. I know you do not want your men to die. So be reasonable. Send her out. Last chance. Still, Cole said nothing. There was a pause. Then Victor's voice again, and this time the friendliness was gone. All right, Barrett, you have made your choice, and I have made mine. And then, from the far side of the barn, a light bloomed, orange, flickering. A torch. Sam Whitefeather's rifle spoke first. A single sharp crack from the smokehouse roof. Someone screamed. The torch dropped and went out in the dirt. And then the whole night exploded. Gunfire from the barn, from the bunkhouse, from the ridge. Cole saw muzzle flashes in the dark like fireflies, saw a man on horseback wheel and fire toward the loft, saw Jed lean out of the hayloft window and put 2 rounds into the man's chest. The wagon came around the side of the barn, fast. The mules lathered and wild-eyed. The driver, Petey, though Cole did not know his name, was lashing them forward, and in the back of the wagon Cole could see the kerosene cans sloshing as the wheels bounced over the ruts. Sam! The wagon! Sam fired. The driver jerked. The reins fell. The mules veered hard left, panicked, and the wagon tipped, slowly, almost gracefully. And then it went over on its side, and the kerosene cans spilled out into the dirt, and one of them split open, and the liquid poured out in a dark spreading pool that gleamed in the starlight. A man on foot ran toward the spill with a torch in his hand. Cole shot him. Once. Center mass. The man dropped. The torch fell into the kerosene. The pool ignited. The fire went up in a sheet of orange and white, fast and hot, and suddenly the whole north side of the yard was bright as noon. Cole could see everything. He could see Victor on his black horse 30 yards out, his face lit by the flames, his eyes locked on the main house. He could see Tillman beside him, firing toward the barn. He could see the third man, the last Doyle brother, trying to control his horse as the animal reared and screamed at the fire. And he could see behind Victor 2 more riders coming over the rise. Not Victor's men. These were different. Silas McCready on a gray mare. And beside him, his foreman, the man who had been at Wounded Knee, on a bay gelding with a repeating rifle across his saddle. McCready reined up, took in the scene, and without a word he raised his rifle and shot Tillman out of the saddle. The Doyle brothers saw McCready and turned to run. Sam Whitefeather shot him before he made it 10 feet. Victor was alone. He sat on his black horse in the middle of the firelight, and he looked at McCready, and he looked at the burning kerosene, and he looked at the bodies of his men, and then he looked at Cole. "Barrett," he said. Cole walked forward, slowly. His Colt was in his hand, hammer back. "Get off my land, Hale. Give me my wife." "She's not your wife. She never was. The law says different." "The law," Cole said, "is a dead man in my yard that you shot in the chest. The law is done with you, Hale. Now get off my land or join your men in the dirt." Victor's hand moved toward his coat. Cole's Colt came up. "Don't." Victor stopped. His hand hovered. "You won't shoot me, Barrett. You're not that kind of man." "I've shot 4 men tonight. What kind of man does that make me?" Victor smiled. It was a thin, cold smile. A man who's about to lose everything. And then he spurred his horse, not away, but forward, straight at the house, and his hand went inside his coat and came out with the pistol, and he fired twice at the upstairs window where he had seen the light, where he knew Elena was. And Cole heard glass break, and he heard Lena scream, and something inside him that had been holding very still for 11 years came loose. He fired. Once, Victor jerked in the saddle. His horse kept running. Victor slid sideways, slowly, and then he fell, and he hit the ground hard, and he did not move. The black horse ran past the house and out into the dark pasture, reins trailing. The yard went silent. The kerosene fire was still burning, but it was starting to die down, the fuel exhausted, and in the fading light, Cole walked to where Victor lay. He was still alive. Barely. There was a hole in his chest, high on the left side, and blood was coming out of his mouth in little bubbles. Cole knelt beside him. Victor's eyes found his. "She was mine," Victor whispered. "No," Cole said. "She was never yours. I paid for her. You paid for a piece of paper. You can't buy a person, Hale. You never could." Victor coughed. More blood. "She'll come back," he said, "when you're gone. When this place is gone. She'll have nowhere else. She'll come back." Cole leaned closer. "She's got somewhere now," he said quietly. "She's got here, and I'm not going anywhere." Victor tried to say something else. He could not. The light went out of his eyes like a candle in a draft, and he stopped breathing, and that was the end of him. Cole stood. He turned to the house. The upstairs window was shattered. He could see lamplight inside. He could hear voices, Marta's, low and urgent, and Lena's, higher, shakier. He ran. He took the stairs 3 at a time. He hit the door with his shoulder, and it flew open, and he stopped. Marta was kneeling on the floor. Lena was sitting against the wall, her hand pressed to her upper arm. Blood was coming through her fingers. "She's all right," Marta said quickly. "It went through. Clean. She's all right, Cole." Cole crossed the room. He knelt beside Lena. "Let me see." She took her hand away. The wound was high on her left arm, just below the shoulder. Marta was right. It had gone clean through, in one side and out the other. It was bleeding, but not badly. Not the kind of bleeding that killed. "Lena." She looked at him. Her face was white. Her eyes were huge. "He's dead, isn't he?" she said. "Yes. You killed him." "Yes." She closed her eyes. She took a long, shaking breath, and then she started to laugh. It was not a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that comes when a person has been holding their breath for 8 years and has finally been allowed to let it out. It was relief and grief and hysteria all at once, and it turned into crying halfway through, and Cole pulled her against him, gently, careful of her arm, and he held her while she shook. "He's dead," she kept saying. "He's dead. He's really dead. He's dead, Lena. He can't hurt you anymore. He's dead. Yeah. I'm free. You're free." She cried for a long time. Marta went downstairs and came back with bandages and whiskey, and she cleaned the wound and wrapped it tight, and Lena did not make a sound, just kept her face pressed against Cole's shoulder and held on. When the crying finally stopped, she pulled back and looked at him. "Cole." "Yeah." "Thank you. You don't have to "Yes, I do, thank you." He nodded. He did not trust himself to speak. Outside, the fire had burned itself out. Jed was in the yard organizing a burial detail. McCready was standing by his horse talking to Sam Whitefeather.
Bobby Quinn was sitting on the porch steps with his bandaged hand and his rifle, and his face the color of old paper. The ranch had not burned. The men were alive. Victor Hale was dead. It was over.
Cole helped Lena to her feet. She swayed a little and he steadied her, and Marta came up on her other side, and together they walked her down the stairs and into the kitchen and sat her in a chair by the stove. Marta made coffee. Nobody spoke. The silence was the good kind, the kind that comes after something terrible is ended and before the next thing begins. At midnight, Jed came in and told Cole that all the bodies were accounted for, 6 of Victor's men, counting Victor. The marshal. They had laid them in a row out past the barn, covered with canvas. In the morning, Jed said, they would take them into town and let the sheriff sort out what to do with them. Cole nodded. You did good tonight, Jed. We all did, boss. Yeah, we did. Jed left. Cole sat at the table across from Lena. She had a cup of coffee in her hands, but she had not drunk any of it. She was just holding it, watching the steam rise. Lena. Yeah. How's the arm? Hurts. I bet. But it's the good kind of hurt. There's a good kind? Yeah, the kind that reminds you you're still alive. He almost smiled. Lena. Yeah, Cole. What are you going to do now? She looked up at him. Her eyes were red and swollen and exhausted, but there was something else in them too. Something he had not seen before. Something that looked a little like hope. I don't know, she said. I haven't thought past tonight. Well, you've got time now, to think, to decide. I do, don't I? You do. She set the coffee cup down. She reached across the table and took his hand. Cole. Yeah. Can I stay? Here? Here. He looked at her tired face and her bandaged arm and her split lip that had finally healed, and her eyes that were, for the first time since he had met her, not looking over her shoulder. Lena, he said, you can stay as long as you want. You can stay forever if you want. This is your home now, if you'll have it. She squeezed his hand. I'll have it, she whispered. Good. Cole? Yeah. I'm scared. Of what? Of what comes next. Of figuring out who I am when I'm not running. Of being a person instead of a piece of property. Of all of it. That's all right. Is it? Yeah. You've got time to figure it out. And you don't have to figure it out alone. She started to cry again, quietly, and this time it was not the crying of relief or grief. It was something softer, something gentler. Thank you, Cole. You keep saying that. I'll keep saying it until you hear it, he smiled. A real one this time. I hear it, Lena. Good. Marta came over and put a hand on Lena's shoulder. Mija, you need to sleep. Come. Upstairs. I will stay with you. All right. Lena stood. She swayed. Marta caught her. Together they walked out of the kitchen, and Cole sat alone at the table with his coffee, listening to their footsteps on the stairs. Outside, the stars were still bright. The wind had picked up, and it carried the smell of burned kerosene and gunpowder and fresh-turned earth. Somewhere out in the dark, a coyote started up, and another answered, and then they both went quiet. Cole sat for a long time. Then he stood, and he walked out onto the porch, and he looked at the yard where 6 men had died and where a woman had finally stopped running, and he thought about his wife, the one he had buried 11 years ago, and he thought about the promise he had made and broken and finally kept. Don't go hard, Cole. He had gone hard. For 11 years. And then Lena had walked up his drive, and she had said please, and something in him had remembered what it felt like to be soft. He did not know what came next. He did not know if Lena would stay or if she would leave when the fear wore off and the world got bigger again. He did not know if he was capable of being the kind of man who could stand beside a woman like that without breaking her. But he knew one thing. He knew that tonight, for the first time in 11 years, he had fought for something other than himself. He had fought for her. And that felt somehow like the beginning of something, not an ending, a beginning. He stood on the porch until the stars started to fade and the first gray light came up over the ridge. Then he went inside, and he lay down on the couch in the front room with his boots still on, and he slept finally, the sleep of a man who has done what needed doing and can, for the moment, rest. The morning came too soon and too bright. Cole woke on the couch with a crick in his neck and the taste of gunpowder still in his mouth. For a moment, he did not remember where he was or why there was dried blood on his shirt sleeve. Then it came back all at once. The fire, the shooting, Victor's body in the dirt. He climbed the stairs and knocked on the bedroom door. "Lena?" No answer. He knocked again. The bolt slid back. Marta stood there with her hair unpinned. "She is sleeping, idiota. She was shot last night. Let her sleep. I just wanted to make sure." "She is fine. Go away." Marta shut the door in his face. Cole went downstairs. His hands were shaking. He did not know why. The danger was over. But when he poured himself coffee, he spilled half of it on the counter. Jed came in through the back door. "Boss, we got a problem." Cole closed his eyes. "What kind of problem?" "The kind with a badge." The sheriff arrived at 8:30 with 2 deputies in a wagon. His name was Frank Donovan. He was 56, heavy across the middle, with a gray beard braided in the old cavalry style. He had been sheriff for 12 years, and he was, as far as Cole knew, an honest man. Donovan reined up at the gate and looked at the yard, at the scorched earth, at the broken window, at the canvas-wrapped bodies. He did not dismount right away. He sat his horse and counted. "Barrett, Sheriff, you want to tell me what in the hell happened here?" Cole told him. "All of it. Lena arriving. The deputy marshal. Victor coming with men and kerosene. The standoff, the shooting." Donovan listened without interrupting. When Cole was finished, the sheriff sat quiet for a long moment. "This woman, Lena, she here?" "She's inside. She was shot last night. Arm. She's resting." "Shot by Hale?" "Yes, sir." Donovan nodded slowly. "Barrett, I'm going to need to talk to her." "She's asleep." "Then wake her." "Sheriff, Barrett, I've got 7 dead men in your yard. One of them is a federal deputy marshal. I need to hear it from the woman. Now go wake her, or I will." Cole's jaw tightened. "Sheriff, she was held by that man for 8 years. He beat her. He broke her arm. Last night she stood on that porch and told him no, and he tried to kill her for it. So if you need to talk to her, you will wait until she wakes up on her own, and you will be respectful when you do. Are we clear?" Donovan stared at him. Then he smiled. "All right, Barrett, I can see how it is." "How what is?" "You and the woman." Cole felt his face go hot. "It's not like that." "Sure it's not." Donovan swung down from his horse. He walked to the canvas and pulled it back from Victor's face. He looked for a long time. Then he covered it again. "I knew Victor Hale," Donovan said quietly. "Not well. Always polite. Always paid his bills. Never caused trouble in my jurisdiction. And I also knew that any man that polite, that careful, that rich, there's usually something ugly under it. I just never had cause to look." He paused. "What I'm saying is, if you're telling me the truth, and I think you are, then what happened here was a man defending his home from an armed party that came to burn and to kill. That's not murder. That's self-defense. And that's what I'm putting in my report." Cole let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. "Thank you, Sheriff. Don't thank me yet. There's going to be an inquest, questions, a judge. And if your story doesn't hold up, I will come back here and arrest you myself. Understood? Understood? Good. Now go get me that woman." Chum. Lena came downstairs 20 minutes later with Marta beside her. Her arm was in a sling. Her face was pale, but she walked steady. "Ma'am," Donovan said, taking his hat off. "Sheriff, I need to ask you some questions." "All right." Donovan took out a notebook. "Your name is Lena Voss. Is that correct?" "It's the name I've been using." "And your legal name?" "Elena Marchetti. I don't know what it is now." "You were married to Victor Hale for 8 years?" "On paper, yes. And during those 8 years, did Mr. Hale ever strike you?" Lena's mouth tightened. "Yes. I stopped counting after the first year. Dozens, maybe more." "Did you ever report it?" "To who?" "The sheriff in Silver Creek worked for him." "Everyone worked for him, Sheriff. Nobody listens to the wife." Donovan kept writing. "And you left in July. Why then?" "Because he broke my arm, and I decided I would rather die on a road somewhere than spend one more day in that house." "And you came here.
I didn't know where I was going. I was just walking. This is where I ended up. And when Mr. Hale came looking for you, Mr. Barrett refused to hand you over. Yes? Why do you think he did that? Lena looked at Cole, standing in the doorway. Because he's a good man, she said quietly. Because he saw something that wasn't right, and he decided to do something about it. Donovan wrote that down. Then he looked up. Last night, when the shooting started, where were you? Upstairs in the back bedroom, with Marta. And Mr. Hale shot through the window. Yes. I saw his face in the firelight. I saw him raise the gun, and then I felt the bullet go through my arm. Did you want Mr. Hale dead, ma'am? Lena closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet. Yes, I did. I wanted him dead for 8 years, but I never thought anyone would. I never thought I'd be free of him, and now I am, and I don't know what to do with that. Donovan closed his notebook. Ma'am, I've been a lawman for 30 years. What happened here last night was not murder. It was justice. Ugly justice, maybe, but justice all the same, and I will swear to that in any courtroom. Lena stared at him. You believe me? I do. She started to cry. Marta pulled her close. Donovan looked at Cole and jerked his head toward the door. They stepped outside. Barrett, there'll be an inquest, probably in 2 weeks. You make sure everyone shows up. You make sure their stories match. And you make sure that woman has someone with her when she testifies, because they are going to try to tear her apart. Who's they? Hale had family, a brother in Cheyenne, a cousin who's a lawyer. They're going to want blood for this, so you be ready. Cole nodded. And Barrett, that woman in there, you care about her? That's not your business, Sheriff. It is if you're going to stand beside her in a courtroom. So I'll ask again. You care about her? Cole was quiet. Yes, I care about her. Then you'd better figure out how much, because if you're not sure, if you're doing this out of pity, you walk away now. But if you're sure, you stand with her. You don't flinch. You don't back down. And you make damn sure she knows she's not alone. You understand me? I understand. Donovan mounted his horse. 2 weeks, Barrett. Don't make me come looking for you. That afternoon, Lena tried to leave. Cole found her in the smokehouse, packing her things. What are you doing? She jumped. I'm leaving. The hell you are? Cole, I can't stay here. You heard what the sheriff said. There's going to be an inquest. Victor's family is going to come after you. They're going to try to take this ranch. And it's my fault. It's not your fault. It is. Cole stepped into the room. He took the bundle out of her hands. Lena, look at me. She did, reluctantly. You didn't bring Victor here. He brought himself. You didn't make him ride onto my land with kerosene. He did that. You were upstairs. You didn't fire a shot. So don't you dare tell me this is your fault. But the inquest is going to happen whether you're here or not. And if you leave now, they're going to say you ran because you're guilty. Is that what you want? No, but nothing. You stay. You stand beside me and you tell the truth, and we let the chips fall. Cole, you could lose everything. I won't. You don't know that. I do, because the truth is on our side, because I've got 11 men who will swear Victor Hale came here with murder in his heart, and because I've got you, and you're the best witness I could ask for. She shook her head, tears running down her face. I don't want you to lose this place because of me. You know how I know I won't? Because Silas McCready, a man who has hated my family for 20 years, rode into my yard and shot one of Victor's men. Because Bobby Quinn stood watch all night because you stitched his hand. Because Marta handed you a shotgun. Because all of us have decided you're worth standing for. She stared at him. So you're not leaving, you're staying, and in 2 weeks we're going to walk into that courthouse together, and we're going to win. Do you understand me? She nodded. He walked out before she could say anything else. The next 2 weeks crawled by. The nightmares came back worse than before. Every night, Lena woke up gasping. Every morning, Marta put coffee in her hands and did not ask questions. Cole kept his distance. He was polite when they passed in the yard. He asked after her arm, but he did not sit with her at meals. Late at night, lying in the dark, she wondered if he regretted it, if he wished he had sent her away that first day. A week before the inquest, a lawyer arrived from Cheyenne.
His name was Samuel Cross, thin, with wire-rimmed glasses. He introduced himself as the attorney representing the estate of Victor Hale. Cole met him at the gate. "Mr. Barrett, I'll be brief. My client's family is prepared to file a wrongful death suit. However, they are willing to settle this matter out of court. $20,000. Paid to the estate. In exchange, all charges will be dropped." Cole stared at him. "You're joking." "I am not, sir. You could sell the ranch, pay the settlement, start over somewhere else." Cole felt something cold move through his chest. "Get off my land." "Mr. Barrett, you tell Victor's brother and his cousin they can take their settlement and go straight to hell. Victor Hale came onto this property with armed men and tried to burn it to the ground. He shot a woman. He shot a federal officer. And he got exactly what he deserved. Now get out of here." Cross climbed back into his buggy. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Barrett." "I made worse." The lawyer rode off. Cole turned and saw Lena on the porch. "You heard that?" "I heard." "Cole, maybe you should take it. Sell the ranch. Pay them." He crossed the yard to her. "Lena, I'm not selling this ranch. My grandfather built that barn. My father built that bunkhouse. I buried my wife on that hill. I am not selling it. But if you lose, I won't lose, because the law is on my side. And the truth is on my side. And you are on my side, and that's enough." She looked at him, eyes wide and wet. "Why do you have so much faith in me?" "Because you've earned it. Every day you've been here, every morning you got up even when you didn't want to. Every time you stood when you could have run." She closed her eyes. A tear slid down her cheek. "I'm scared, Cole. I'm scared they're going to take this place from you." He stepped closer. He put his hand on the side of her face. "Then I'll stand beside you," he said quietly. "And if they take this place, we'll find another. But we're not running. You hear me?" She nodded, covering his hand with hers. "I hear you." Anta. The night before the inquest, Lena could not sleep. At 2 a.m, she went downstairs. Cole was sitting at the table with coffee and a lamp turned low. "Couldn't sleep either?" he said. "No?" She sat across from him. He poured her a cup. They sat in silence. The clock ticked. "Cole, what happens if we lose tomorrow?" "We won't." "But if we do? If we lose, then I pay whatever fine the judge levies. I sell whatever I have to sell. And we figure out the next thing. But we don't split up, Lena. Whatever happens, we're in this together. All right?" "All right." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Tomorrow, you're going to walk into that courthouse and tell your story. And it's going to be hard, but you're going to do it. Because you're stronger than you think, and because I'm going to be right there beside you every step. I'm not going anywhere. You understand?" "I understand." "Say it. You're not going anywhere." "That's right." She squeezed his hand. "Cole, I think I—" She stopped. She did not know how to finish the sentence. He looked at her for a long moment. "I know," he said quietly. "Me too." They sat that way until the sky went gray. Then Marta made breakfast, and by the time the sun was up, they were in the wagon headed for town, and Lena's hand was still in Cole's, and neither of them had let go. They rode back to the ranch in silence. Not the heavy kind of silence that presses down on a person like a weight. The other kind. The kind that settles over people who have just walked through fire together and are still catching their breath on the other side. Lena sat in the wagon between Cole and Marta, her bandaged arm held close to her body, her face turned toward the mountains. The sky was going that particular blue it gets in late afternoon, deep and clean, and the light was slanting gold across the valley floor. She watched it all as if she were seeing it for the first time. In a way, she was. Cole kept his eyes on the road. His hands were steady on the reins, but his mind was caught somewhere between the courtroom and that moment on the courthouse steps when Lena had kissed him in front of half the county. He did not know what it meant. He was afraid to ask. He was more afraid not to. Behind them, in a second wagon, Jed and the boys were singing something off-key and cheerful. Bobby Quinn's voice kept cracking on the high notes. When they pulled into the yard, the sun was just touching the ridge. Marta climbed down and announced she was making supper for everyone. No arguments. Nobody argued. Lena stood beside the wagon, looking at the house, at the barn, at the scorched patch of earth where the kerosene had burned. At the window upstairs that Cole had replaced, the new glass still bright against the weathered frame. "You all right?" Cole said, coming up beside her. "I don't know yet." "Fair enough?" "Cole?"
"Yeah. What I did. In the courthouse. I shouldn't have—" "Stop." She looked at him. He took his hat off, turned it over in his hands. "Put it back on." Finally, he just held it and looked at her. "I'm not good at this," he said. "Talking, about feelings, any of it. I've spent 11 years not talking, and now you're standing here and I don't know what to say except that when you kissed me today, I didn't want you to stop. And I don't know what that means or where it goes or if you even meant it the way I took it. But I needed you to know." Lena stared at him. "You're an idiot," she said. He blinked. "What?" "Cole Barrett, you are an idiot. Of course I meant it. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you for 2 weeks and I couldn't find the words, so I just kissed you. In front of everyone. Because I'm also an idiot. We're both idiots." He started to smile. "We are, aren't we?" "Completely." She stepped closer. She reached up and took the hat out of his hands and set it on the porch rail. "I don't know how to do this," she said quietly. "I don't know how to be with someone without being afraid. I don't know how to trust that it won't turn into what it was before. I don't either. I've been alone for 11 years. I don't know how to let someone in without breaking, but maybe we figure it out together, one day at a time." "One day at a time." "Yeah, I can do that." He leaned down and kissed her, slow, careful. When he pulled back, she was crying a little. "I'm not used to this," she said. "To being happy. To feeling like maybe things are going to be all right. It's scary, Cole." "I know." She pressed her forehead against his chest, and he put his arms around her, and from the kitchen Marta's voice drifted out, singing something in Spanish that sounded like home. That night they ate at the long table in the bunkhouse. Marta had made enough food to feed twice that many. The men ate like they had not seen food in a week. Sam Whitefeather raised his tin cup. "To Miss Lena, who's got more guts than any 3 men I ever met?" "Hear, hear," Jed said, and the others echoed it. Lena felt her face go hot. "Thank you," she said quietly. "All of you, for standing with me." "Wasn't a question, ma'am," Bobby Quinn said. "You stitched my hand. Far as I'm concerned, you're family." "Family," someone else echoed. And then they were all saying it, and Lena had to excuse herself because she was crying again. She made it as far as the water pump before Cole found her. "You all right?" "I don't know. I'm not used to this, Cole. Every time something good happens, I keep waiting for the other thing, the bad thing." Cole was quiet for a moment. "My wife, Sarah," he said. "I spent 11 years thinking if I'd done something different, she'd still be here. I spent 11 years waiting for the floor to drop out. And you know what I figured out? The floor is always going to drop out, sooner or later. That's life. But you can choose what you do in between. You can choose to shut down and go hard and never let anyone in. Or you can choose to stay soft, to let people matter, to take the risk." She looked at him. "You're not as dumb as you look, Cole Barrett." He almost laughed. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Cole, I want to stay. Here. Not because I'm hiding, but because this is where I want to be." "Then stay. Just like that. Just like that." The weeks that followed were the quietest Lena had known in years. The ranch settled back into its rhythm. Marta taught her to bake bread. Lena's first 3 loaves came out like rocks. By the 10th, she had the hang of it. She started sleeping through the night. Not every night, but more nights than not. Cole gave her a horse, a little bay mare named Rosie. Lena had not been on a horse in 8 years. The first time she tried to mount, her hands were shaking so badly she could not find the stirrup. But she got up, and she rode every morning after that. Out to the ridge where she could see the whole valley spread out below her, and for the first time in her life she felt like she owned something. Not the land, just the moment, the choice. One morning in late September, she rode back to find Cole waiting at the gate. "We need to talk," he said. Her stomach dropped. "About what?" Inside, he turned to face her. "Lena, I need to ask you something. What do you want, long term, a year from now, 5 years?" "I want to stay here," she said slowly. "I want to keep learning. I want to wake up and not be afraid. I want to build something that's mine, and I want to be with you, if you'll have me. Not as someone you're protecting, but as a partner." He let out a long breath. "Okay." That's what I wanted to hear. He pulled out a small wooden box and handed it to her. Inside was a ring, simple, a thin gold band with a small green stone. It was my grandmother's, Cole said quietly. My father gave it to my mother. I gave it to Sarah. I put it away for 11 years. And yesterday I thought, maybe it's time. I'm asking you to marry me, Lena. Not today, not next week. Whenever you're ready. I love you. And if you need more time, I'll wait. She was crying. Cole, I'm a mess. I wake up screaming. I don't know how to be a wife. He knelt and took her hands. Because you're the bravest person I've ever met. Because you walked 40 miles to get away and you kept going. Because you stood on that porch and told a monster no. And because when I look at you, I see a woman who survived. And I want to stand beside you while you figure out what comes next. She nodded, crying, and he slid the ring onto her finger. Is that a yes? That's a yes, Cole. Yes.
They were married in the spring on the ridge with the whole valley spread out below. The vows were short, Cole's were simple. I promise to stand beside you, to see you, and I promise that as long as I'm alive, you will never be alone again. Lena's were shorter. I promise to stay, to not run when things get hard, and I promise to love you even when I don't know how. The justice said the words that made it legal, and Cole kissed her, and everyone cheered. Lena thought about the last time she had stood in front of a justice of the peace, her father drunk beside her, Victor watching with flat eyes, the whole thing a transaction. This was not that. This was a choice. Hers. 5 years later, Lena stood in the same yard on a morning in early summer, watching Cole and Jed load a wagon. She was 32 now. Her hands were rough from work. There were lines at the corners of her eyes from squinting into the sun and from smiling. There was a baby on her hip. A little girl, 2 years old, with Cole's dark hair and Lena's gray eyes. Her name was Sarah. Mama, Sarah said, tugging on Lena's braid. What baby? Down. She set the baby down and Sarah toddled toward the garden where Marta was pulling weeds. Cole came over. We're about ready. Should be back in a week. I'll be fine, Cole. I know you can handle it. He kissed her. Sarah made a disgusted noise. Marta laughed. Go, Lena said. She watched the wagon roll away, and she did not feel afraid. She just felt steady, like a tree that had finally put down roots deep enough to hold through any storm. That night, after Sarah was asleep, Lena sat on the porch with coffee and looked out at the valley. She thought about Victor sometimes, not often. She thought about the woman she had been in his house, the one who had believed she was nothing, who had believed no one would help. She thought about how wrong he had been. Because people did help. When you stopped running long enough to let them. When you stood up and said this is not right. When you took the risk of trusting someone. She had learned that survival was not the same as living. That you could survive for years without ever really being alive. And that the moment you stopped surviving and started living, that was when everything changed. She had learned that home was not a place. It was a choice you made every day to stay, to fight, to build something worth keeping. She had learned that love was not ownership. It was partnership. Two people standing side by side and saying, I see you, I choose you, I will not let you fall. And she had learned that she was not nothing. She was not property. She was Lena Barrett, wife, mother, survivor. And she was home. The stars came out over the ridge. Somewhere a coyote called. Lena sat on the porch and breathed in the night air. And she was not afraid. Not of the dark, not of the future, not of the past. She was just here, present, alive, and that was enough. That was everything. The years that followed brought droughts and hard winters, and days when Lena and Cole could barely stand to look at each other. But they learned. They stumbled, and they got back up. They had 2 more children. Marta lived to be 81. Bobby Quinn married McCready's daughter. The ranch grew. And every year on the anniversary of the day Lena had walked up the drive, Cole would take her hand and walk her out to the place where he had first met her. And he would say, thank you for asking. And she would say, thank you for saying yes. Because the truth that Lena carried with her every day was this: freedom is not given. It is taken. It is fought for. It is earned in small moments of courage, in the decision to stand when everything says to run, in the choice to trust when experience has taught you not to, And once you have fought for it, once you have taken it, then it is yours. Forever. Lena had fought. She had taken. She had held. And she had won. Not because she was perfect. Not because she was fearless. But because she had stood. When it mattered most, she had stood. And that was all it took. One woman, one choice, one moment of saying no when the whole world said yes. That was how chains broke. That was how Lena Voss, who had been nothing, who had been told for 8 years that she did not matter, became Lena Barrett, wife, mother, survivor, free.